Well, as I mentioned on a video earlier, we have some new rules in place, and I made a whole video breaking down the hip drop tackle. We'll have a little bit more information about that now as more time has passed, but I want to kind of wait until all the information comes out and then give a quick review of what are the new rules that have been implemented in the NFL, and which rules did not get implemented, what got shot down. And let's actually start there with what isn't going to be implemented. First, we have the Eagles' proposed 4th and 20 alternative to the onside kick did not pass again. I like that idea, which is you could decide to go for it on a 4th and 20 instead of kick an onside kick. I think that'd be more fun. I want to see quarterbacks be playing in the biggest moments of the game, not special teams guys. Sorry to all the special teams fans watching this, but I understand why it keeps getting shot down, but I think it'd be fun. Also, the Colts withdrew their proposal to allow a coach or replay official to challenge any foul that has been called. The idea being, like, instead of only being able to challenge certain things, you can kind of challenge anything. At that point, again, we saw it with the pass interference challenge stuff. It gets very sketchy. It tends to not really, it's hard to, allowing that to be reviewable opens up a big kind of can of worms that you wouldn't necessarily think when you're, doing it. So I agree with that not being a new rule change personally. As for the new rules, so these are the 3 new rules, although there's actually a 4th one that we'll talk about in just a second that I guess isn't officially a rule, but we'll talk about it. First, number 1 is to protect the club's ability to challenge a third ruling following one successful challenge. So the way the rules are currently in play is that you have 2 challenges. If you win both of your challenges, you get a third challenge. This has now changed it to where all you have to do is win one of your first 2 challenges and you get a third challenge, which kind of makes some sense, right? It is one of those unfortunate things of if you lose your first challenge, then you know that your next challenge is your last. Even if you get it right, it's going to be correct, and there is kind of a scenario of, would you challenge a 10-yard completion in the first quarter if you've already lost the challenge? Even if you know you'd win the challenge, now you're out of challenges. Well, here, you can still do that as long as you win the challenge, you're okay. So, interesting rule change there. I don't really have an issue. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of instant replay and all that stuff anyway, but, if we're going to have it, we should have it make sense, and this makes it make more sense. So, and that's a whole conversation for another day about my take on that. But for now, I'm not, I think it makes sense. This is number 5. So there's other kind of smaller things that have been implemented, but the next one on the list, to allow for an enforcement of a major foul by the offense prior to a change of possession in a situation where there are fouls by both teams. It's a bit complex, and I heard people kind of reporting things that I don't believe are actually true here, but essentially what this just means is that if there are offsetting penalties on a specific play where a team gets possession of the football, if the penalty on the offense is, unsportsmanlike conduct or a pass, not pass interference, but a, personal foul, then it can allow the team that possessed the ball, the team that, if you got an interception, they can continue to keep the ball, something like that, which is, again, a bit complex and not really that important, I think, either, but interesting. And then finally, the other one was the hip drop tackle, the one that got all the attention, which, the way it's phrased is to eliminate a potentially dangerous tackling technique. And as I said, I made a whole video kind of discussing it. One thing that has happened since then, though, is we have the actual language of the rule. So I want to read that. This is the language of the rule, the hip drop tackle. It is a foul if a player uses the following technique to bring a runner to the ground. A, grabs the runner with both hands or wraps the runner with both arms, and B, unweights himself by swiveling and dropping his hips or lower body, landing on and trapping the runner's legs at or below the knee. For a hip drop penalty, it is a loss of 15 yards and an automatic first down. It's a personal foul penalty. It will be treated as a horse collar tackle. Again, I made a whole video kind of discussing the pros and cons of all of that. I did see, worth mentioning, Kenyon Drake has tweeted out that, like, hey, people don't like this, but I, lost a quarter of a season due to getting hurt on a play like this. People do get hurt on this stuff. It is a dangerous play. Also, defensive players do have to be able to tackle offensive players too. So I get both sides of the argument. But that is kind of the controversial one. As I said, I had a whole video about that. But there's actually one other rule that I think is kind of the most interesting one here that hasn't gotten talked about at all, because it's not really a rule, but more of a replay adjustment. According to Tom Pelissero, this is big. NFL Competition Committee Chairman Rich McKay told me that the replay assistant will now be permitted to correct certain types of incorrect calls for roughing the passer, and intentional grounding must be purely objective. So the quarterback wasn't hit in the head, was out of pocket, etc. So this is fascinating, because prior to this, the person watching upstairs, so again, to be clear on what this is, the replay assistant, that does not mean a challengeable play. That is something completely different. There is someone who is watching the games upstairs. They can call down to a ref and say, hey, this new thing happened. So, for example, if you hear the refs talking and they say, he was, it was a catch, and then 10 seconds later they say, actually, the ruling on the field is an incomplete pass. A lot of times what happens is it's actually the replay assistant calling down and changing that. In the past, you could only do it for stuff like that, catch, not catch. Now, they're adding some, penalties into the mix, which me personally, I already mentioned I'm not crazy about instant replay, but I'm all for this. Get the calls right in a way that doesn't slow down the game. This makes perfect sense to me. It says it must be purely objective. So, for example, if it looked like the quarterback was hit in the head, but on a replay, the quarterback flopped and wasn't hit at all, then you can do it. If it's, intentional grounding, if they said that the ball didn't get back to the line of scrimmage, but it did, then you can do that. So, this totally makes sense to me, and kind of, I think, isn't a bad idea whatsoever. Again, they're not going to just completely review roughing the passer. That's not what's happening. But yeah, as a whole, I do think that that's an interesting thing, and I do wonder if that will help. I mean, I think the number one thing people complain about is roughing the passer penalties, and this can hopefully get those a little bit more under control and get rid of the ones where a quarterback doesn't get touched and the, a flag still comes out. I have bad news if you think this is going to fix the roughing the passer penalty thing, because guys are going to get hit, and flags are going to come out. It is what it is. But yeah, some interesting rule changes, I think, here by the NFL. I don't agree with all of them, but it'd be kind of weird if I did agree with all of them. And I don't hate any of them, I would say. I think that, I don't really have a huge issue with them. I get that a lot of people are going to be mad about certain things, but again, there's never once in the history of the NFL been a rule change that people didn't get mad about. That's just, people like to get mad. It is what it is. So, yeah, those are the new rules. What do you think about them? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from y'all. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.